Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now here's your host, Roxanne Derhodge.
Hi, everyone. It's Roxanne Derhodge of Authentic Living with Roxanne. Today, I'm going to say I have an amazing woman that I've been spending. We met about a year ago, at least over a year ago, in our writing group. We were privileged to some amazing women that get together. We started to get together through the pandemic. And I would say, and I've shared this openly, that was my thing to put structure into my day. But out of this has came an amazing network of thought leaders, female thought leaders, and we meet and we write and we talk about all the things that are important to us. And we still meet every single morning since the beginning of the pandemic. So Cheryl-Ann Lovie, thanks so much for taking the time to spend with us today.
Oh, Roxanne, my pleasure. I am so grateful and honored to be asked to come on your podcast and speak to your viewers. I equally feel the same as you about the writing group. We started in March of 2020. I'm not sure whether you were on that first.
Yes, I joined. I was right out off the hop, and I think I got to know you a little bit better later as we went along.
Yes, and as the group maybe got a little smaller and more intimate, we got to know each other a little bit better. But it's been such an incredible experience to build on something I was already starting, but it just encouraged that growth by having structure and routine every single day. So I also am so grateful to have met you.
So I want Cheryl-Ann to explain, like Cheryl-Ann and I just recently did keynotes at a huge conference of women in agriculture, where I was able to hear her keynote, which was quite impressive. But I want her to tell you a little bit about her background before we jump into some of the juicy nuggets about her story and the things that she's doing out there in the world with her keynote speaking and also her book. So Cheryl-Ann, tell the listeners a bit about you and what your background is.
Well, thank you. I love to talk about myself.
We like that too, don't we?
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Yeah. Actually, I started a heating and cooling company with my husband 16 years ago. And I found myself living in a world in a male-dominated industry where I learned all kinds of new strategies, good and bad. And I feel like that company was instrumental in all of the boundaries that I've learned since then and that I've put forward in my book and the other parts of my life. But due to the fact that we owned that company, things were crazy. It was extremely busy. And of course, then COVID hit and things got crazier. And we had to make some decisions to relieve some stress in our world. And that's where things changed. Things got overly stressful. And I was the hamster running on the wheel. I ran for board positions. I was, being a big part in our community, trying to build growth within the community, as well as for my own business. Of course, we can't lie about these things. You're in that to expose yourself and put you out there. And I was doing that for sure, but also met some incredible people and learned so much about what's the right way to live your life and what's the right way to grow yourself, not necessarily a business. And once you start growing yourself, that's when things really started to change for me.
So let's talk a little bit about, obviously you've been in business, you know what it is to build a business from the ground up. And I know recently when we met, you were in the process of selling it. But obviously your story, and she has this amazing book that will be launched, and we'll make sure that you have links to her website, CherylAnnLovie.com, and it's called It's Your Turn. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the pivotal moment and the experience that happened to you that made you think, I've got to share this, and what happened there so that people can listen to your story from that angle.
Yeah, I think it's a great story because it sends such a huge message to all of us that I was that hamster running on that wheel nonstop, doing everything for everyone and not taking time for me. And I had just returned home from Jamaica because Jason and I went on a trip thinking we're just going to get some time to ourselves and release. Came back, and when you come back from vacation, you're just like overwhelmed. There's so much to do, and you're just almost more stressed than when you left to go on vacation. I felt that way anyway. And I noticed this small little spot at the top of my hairline. Now, I did get a really bad burn in Jamaica, so I thought, maybe it's that. And I didn't have time to concern myself with it. I had a job to do. I had to get going. We had a huge trade show coming up. I looked after all the organization of the trade show. And I also stood on that floor for the next 4 days coming up to, sell my products and talk about my company. And so I was full on go to work, get things done as soon as I came home, literally tripping over luggage in my home, trying to get organized and ready for work. And every day it was just getting a little bigger and a little bigger. And finally, because I thought I should open another business, I was looking at a retail property in Woodstock, and my real estate agent, who was suffering from a pretty serious disease himself, looked at me and said, "Cheryl-Ann, something's wrong with your head." Yeah, kind of noticed it. And then I looked in my mirror in my car, and it was my entire forehead had this big loop on it. So I thought, oh, I better go. So I checked the walk-in clinics in town. Hadn't been to one in my life. Again, go figure. I don't go to the doctor very much. And I went to the clinic, and I'm in the driveway of the clinic. And I look over, and the place is full. It said it opened at 5. It was 4:30. What is going on? How does this happen? People just arrive and hang out at the clinic, So I got there, and just as I'm about to get out of my car, it hit me. I have shingles. And the reason why I thought I had shingles is because I've been watching those commercials over and over and over again. And I all of a sudden just put 2 and 2 together. I thought, this is what it is. This is what I have on my head is shingles. And I walked in the door, and he said, "You have shingles, my friend, and it's too late for the antivirus. I might as well feed you chiclets."
Mm, wow.
So it was a moment in time that I believe God sent me a really strong message that, or you're going to be doomed. This is going to be a lot worse than shingles. And from that day forward, I heard everything from everyone. You're going to suffer so much. This pain is so intense. This is going to be the worst ever. I didn't realize that this actual shingles that I had was called Ramsay-Hunt syndrome because it affected my eye. And Ramsay-Hunt syndrome is very, very serious, over and above what shingles can do to you, because it actually affects you more neurologically, because shingles is affecting your nerves. And so therefore I covered my whole face, my eyes were swelled shut. And you know what? I really think that if I would have had shingles on my back or my stomach or under my arm, I probably still would have went to that trade show on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, maybe Thursday, and set up. I mean, I was that kind of person that would have said, I can muddle through. But when your face is swelled, I couldn't see. I was literally in bed for
Was
16
it close
days.
to your eye? Was it close to your eye?
No, it was inside my eye, right on
Goodness.
my pupil, and also on the sides of my eye. And in that keynote, I actually showed a couple pictures just so people could see this wasn't, not that shingles is minor ever, because it really isn't, because it's not just the lesions that you suffer from with shingles, but you also get an overall feeling of unwell, like you're just not well. And for somebody like me, like I told you when we were speaking before, I'm A-type. I just go. And if I'm sick, I make it as much as I possibly can. And that's not always wise. That's just because I'm A-type doesn't mean that's a good thing sometimes, and it forced me to take some time to really heal and get better. And in that time, I listened, because I couldn't see, but I listened. I used
So
both
let's
my
talk about that slowing, right? Like, because I'm curious about that, right? Understanding that, a lot of entrepreneurs, and you're a single, Cheryl-Ann was a single mom with twins, not just one, but two, and, making it on her own, doing lots of things. When you get slowed, something happens, and I've often heard this, and I think I have a bit of a story like that as well in my own life. What happened to you when you slowed down?
Well, I think what happened to me is that I started, first of all, I started to ask, why me? I think that's the first thing that happens is you start to ask yourself, why me? And because I'm such a positive person all the time anyway, I began to look at it as more of a, why me, God? Why am I going through this? There has to be a good, solid reason. So I think that was my number one, dig deeper. And then once I did that, then I started to just take the time to release. Like, I need to just get rid of all this stress. I need to just, and I also needed to realize that I didn't have to do everything. They could help. My team, I had a full team. I had 9 staff at that time. They can do this. I don't have to be on the floor. Although, just so you know, we didn't sell as many barbecues that year. I have to take, I have to throw that in there because, that's just, I'm a sales girl. That's what I do. So that was difficult for me to swallow, but it's fine. It's fine. I feel like what I went through gave me time. It's almost like meditation. You actually can calm because there's not all these, I couldn't do it. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't worry about it. I couldn't think about it. I just released it and I let it be.
I wonder, like, and I'm curious, right? Like, if you, through this reflection and stuff like that, in that quiet, you obviously had to listen, and I shouldn't say you had to, but you listened and you learned, and obviously out of this came this amazing book. Where do you think that message that you had to do it all on your own start? Was there a particular time when you kind of look back that you think, oh, this is kind of where this little bud kind of got planted? And then, all those years later, this shingles is kind of giving you it's giving you the full blossom of the flower, and you're realizing, oh, I have got to do something about this.
Well, Roxanne, you couldn't have asked a better question. That's incredible, because it does start way back there. It starts way back when that bud's formed. Those roots are planted really strong, and they're the ones you don't see. And I wrote that in my book. I was raised by an alcoholic. I had a great mom who was very responsible, not necessarily stable, but responsible, paid our bills, made sure we were looked after, fed, clothed, lived in a sort of middle-class type lifestyle, but still struggled because she was living with an alcoholic. And I remember just looking at them all. Probably I was young. I know I was young because it was when I feel I have my first memories of my self-talk, when I need to be in control somehow. Like, somehow I have to be different than them. And I think that's where it started, is where I just thought, you know what, I have to be the one orchestrating, or it's just going to get all messed up like it was in my home. It was a crazy, chaotic lifestyle that I lived in. And that's, I think, sometimes the adversity is and the resilience that we learn is what teaches us about finding the hidden gift. We wouldn't even go looking for it if we didn't have some of that sometimes in our background.
Absolutely. And, obviously you were driven to achieve certain goals. And isn't it interesting that a lot of times you'll see people around kind of the age and stage where something happens to them, and all of a sudden they're reckoned to stop and listen, take the positives from the adversity, which obviously was a lot of positives in your adversity, but to also say what parts of some of the patterns that I had, okay, it helped me get this far, but I don't know if you're going to go on the rest of the journey with me here. And that's where you have the fork in the road. So let's talk a little bit about that. You're on your back, you're covered, you're listening, you're having to do all these things. What kind of things did you start to do to learn to take care of yourself? And then what did you start to discontinue so that you could kind of be at the space that you're at now?
Fantastic. I actually feel like the intensity of learning was what got me here. I'm, as I told you, I'm A-type. So as soon as I realized that this was happening for a really good reason, that life is happening for us, then I started to draw into, what do I need to do to help myself? And I started to listen to people like Brene Brown, like Tony Robbins. I like Tony because I'm a grit kind of a girl. That's how I made it in the male dominated industry. So I like Tony Robbins. I like Gary Vee. I listen to those people regularly so I could build more information to know how to deal with the stress and how to take things out of my life. And what I really realized is that I can only control what I can control. Only thing that my hands touch and my mind deals with is what I can control. So I started to change the way I looked at the things I was doing in my life. And if my team could do it, then I orchestrated and taught them how to do that. It might be in my wheelhouse now, but I can move it over to their trailer and let them deal with it. And that's what I think was the biggest lesson in my journey was finding mentors, like finding some great people to really build on. And even as I told you before, listening to your podcast even gave me more information for moving forward with my speaking business and how that, strengthens you just to grab some really good, solid information. And then here's the next biggest thing. Write down what you want. It's got to be concrete. It's got to be real. You can't just go along saying, oh, I took this as a message and I'm going to get better and I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that. You actually really need to focus on what you want so that you can start eliminating things to get there. And, there were things and people in my life that were creating stress for me. And I was just going along. My dad, I was now looking after my abuser. That's probably one of the biggest challenges I had to overcome. Everyone was like, well, why are you being so nice to him? Why are you looking after him? He did all these, and I didn't have to explain to them, but I had to explain to me why I was doing what I was doing. And I was doing it because I wasn't mirroring him. I wasn't going to be who he was. I was going to walk away feeling like I controlled and managed the relationship with my dad now. And I wasn't always there perfect. I wasn't. I did what I did for me to help me, but I still looked after him and laid him to rest in 2019. And I have no regrets about how I managed his life and my own during that process, because when I got shingles, I was back and forth with him. Should I look after him? Shouldn't I look after him? Should I be nice to him? Should I be angry with him? Those things are real life. That's real life stuff that happens. And how do you deal with it when it's my dad?
So really what we're talking about here is, and bear with me as I kind of reiterate this, is like, you adapted, right? Like I say, it's an adaptive process where you figured out, okay, what is it that I have to do to survive? And I figured out who Cheryl-Ann is through this. And then I learned not to rely on others because there wasn't enough space for your mom did the best she could with what she had. And then when shingles came around, it allowed you to really look at boundaries, which clearly you set some boundaries, first of all, sounds like with yourself. And then you ultimately set boundaries with what I'm going to say, who's around you in that 10-foot radius, so that that could be more of a reflective lens of the kind of life that you needed to have to continue to be successful and healthy.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, those 10 people around us, I have, like you said, I had twins, but I also had a third child. So I have 3 children and I raised them by myself. And I feel like I took that control and managed it very well with those girls, but now they have children of their own, husbands, and I was everything to them too. So not only, and not that this is the thing that we have to also realize, is that it isn't that the people around you expect this of you. That's not necessarily what happens. Nobody expected me to be, they just continued to accept it from me because I was offering it. Until I realized that, I don't have to have family dinner for 13 people every single Sunday. Why don't we start doing it every other Sunday?
Or have everybody do a potluck and you do it kind of, so that way you still get the connection. But again, sometimes it's those tweaks, right? Like people don't realize that you're right. It's kind of like the boundary always existed. So do I just keep the boundary? But unfortunately, sometimes it takes like a shingles outbreak. And with myself, part of my story, I don't know if you know this, but it's almost 11 years ago, I was knocked completely out by a complete stranger when I was walking down the street in Toronto. And my life never stopped changing from that point on, because I was in a bad marriage, trying to figure it out. And through the recovery, same, not unlike your story, Cheryl-Ann, quite literally, when I was on my back in Toronto, I said there was a blue-eyed angel, I call him, whoever he was. Never found him, called him several times to say thank you. And on my back that day, I remember laying there with his jacket at the bottom of my neck, because people, good Samaritans, do these things, right? And then he said, he looked right at me, and he says, everything's going to be all right. And those words still reverberate through me as I think 11 years later, because again, at that point, I listened. There was things I needed to do that were right in front of me. And the kind of life that I've created since then, 11 years after the fact, I needed to make changes.
Yes. And I think that's the message, is that we do get a choice. We get a choice to see it however we want to see it. The why me happens first, and we can decide, oh, because everything bad happens to me, I'm poor me, everything bad happens. Or we can say, listen, let's figure out why I need to go through this and why I need to focus and change things so that this message doesn't go unwritten. There has to be a reason why I did this. And it's funny, as you were talking, I was just thinking about this customer I had. His name was Felix, and he was German. He had a very thick accent, and he used to come in the store just to chin wag with me. And he would take up mountains of time, but he had so many words of wisdom. And his one thing he always said to me regarding almost everything was, Cheryl-Ann, there's all these ways. There's all these ways. And he was so right. There are so many ways, to find where you should be. And it's because you are in control. You can make whatever way you choose. Those ways are there. And I think with what happened, I didn't know that story about you, Roxanne, and that's
I
such a
you
great
did.
story.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. That's such a great story. And I think that's what, even my shingle story might not think it's that big of a deal. It was huge for me. And it took me from there. I'm so grateful that it happened to me, because it took me from there to selling our company and building my speaking career and writing a book. And I wrote a book about child abuse, basically that you can gain a lot of, not recommending living in child abuse by any stretch, but it gave me so much to anchor on and to build from. And I remember always being in the Hallmark store and looking at the cards and saying to myself, how can I ever buy a card for my dad? What do you say? He's not that guy. He didn't teach me. But guess what? He did teach me. He taught me a ton of stuff. And all those things are inside of me now. I can choose to look at it as evil, or I can choose to look at it as he mentored me in a way that he wasn't intentional on his side, but it's been intentional on my side to take that learning and put it into hopefully doing so much more for the world and for people that are suffering from the same things. And maybe it's just because you're an innate personality and you don't realize that that doesn't define you.
The pain does not define you. The pain does not define you. And out of, unfortunately, adversity comes a lot of strength. So let's say the average person listening, and they're in pain, right? And and maybe they're in pain, but they don't realize they need to make some changes. What would be some quick tips? This amazing book that's going to be out in January, It's Your Turn, has a lot of phenomenal nuggets in it. But what are a couple of those quick tips that you'd say to someone that says, start now? What would you tell them?
The first thing I would tell them to do is to get out a piece of paper and a pen, not a computer, but a piece of paper and a pen, because there's something about that feeling that is different than typing it into a computer. And just write down everything you want? What would you like? Maybe even go back and see yourself as a little girl. What was fun for you? What was fun, or a little boy? What was fun? What sparked you? What made you go, wow, I love this life? And because there was a time for all of us when that happened. Even if you were in so much pain right now, there's a memory back there that you can pull out and transfer to paper. And this is what I want. This is where I want to be. And this is what I want to do. And write it all down. Because the only way to discover how to get somewhere is to figure out where the heck you're going. And then start building your roadmap. Start from here and then go there. And I found my journaling was probably the most important part of my success in boundary setting and breaking those patterns that were groomed in me my whole life. My dad didn't let us sit. When I was at home, if he came home from work and we were sitting down, you're kids, you come home, first thing you want to do, get out some Kraft dinner and eat that. And then the next thing you want to do is just chill out and watch some TV. That's not allowed in my house. The second my dad walked in the door, it's, hey, there's dishes in the dishwasher, the house is not spotless, the grass needs to be cut, the pond needs to be dug, like, you need to move, get moving. And he didn't do it nicely. He was a get her done kind of guy. And so that's groomed inside of us. We think this is how we have to be. So to transfer that now to paper and say, no, does that give me joy? That doesn't give me joy. Let's break down what gives me joy. And you can also make a secondary list that tells you what doesn't make you joy or doesn't give you joy. And maybe that will, you can still, some things you got to do that aren't fun. That's just life. But if you can find a way to enjoy those things by adding a little spice in, just like, you can get through the medicine if you toss it with a water after, let's sort of top it off with a little bit of cheer. And that's so number one, write it down. Number two, review it regularly every single day. It's almost like you start all new rituals. If there's something out there that you really want to do, figure out how you can do it, whatever that is. But if you don't focus on it and you don't, people say the law of attraction is bogus because of this or that, or, you can't just wish for a new bike and it'll show up. But if you start really, I really want a hot tub. And I thought, well, I'm just going to start looking at how much they cost. What do I need to budget for? I wrote it down. I looked at it every day. I checked my finances. We have one now. I didn't get any richer today than I was when I wanted for something, but you can do that with everything in your life. You can do that with, we sold said, this has got to change. I am going to be a speaker. I spoke for many, many charity organizations in our city. I helped fundraise. I did all sorts of great things, sat on boards, and realized that's what I love to do. I want to do more of that. That's where I want my life to go. And I don't want to look back when I'm, gone, maybe, or in the home and say, geez, I wished I had of, because there's no reason to say that. You can just keep on going along, and age is not a factor. So if you're in pain, write it down. If you're in pain, review it every day. If you're in pain, find what you love and start building a roadmap for that, because if there's no way to get a roadmap if you don't know where the heck you're going. So you got to do those things and start new daily rituals, recreate your life. When I was a single mom, my doctor said to me one time, when I was debating on whether I'm going to go with my husband, who is, had many affairs on me, or was I going to just leave him and start my own life? He said to me, will you ever get over the fact that your husband had an affair? Turns out he had multiple affairs, but at the time I only knew about the one. And I thought to myself, no, I know myself well enough to know that I'm not going to get over that. That was way too big for me. So he said, well, then you need to create your own new traditions in your new life. And, that was back long before Dr. Phil and Tony Robbins and all those people. That was long before that. My doctor was a smart guy. And he said, you need to start all new traditions, things that you always wanted to do that your ex-husband didn't want to do. You want to do all those new things. And I'll tell you, that's the same as right now when you're sitting there and you're in pain, is you need to find change up what you're doing to get better results. Find the results that you're looking for and then build that roadmap to get there.
And a good way to do that too is to say, I know what I don't want, and to write a list down of what I want instead. Even if you start there, right? And
Agreed.
That's a basic thing. And you're so right, because then at that point, you're engaging the logical part of the brain, which is where we need to be able to actually achieve things, right? And then reinforce it going in, like you said, day in, day out, and to quiet that voice that said, oh, you can't sit still, or you can't achieve that, right? That voice, if that voice is bigger than the one, which it will be first, eventually, with these daily rituals, what starts to happen is then your voice that says, yeah, I'd like that hot tub. I deserve that hot tub, and that starts to become the pervasive big bullhorn in your head that goes, oh, okay, I can do this. And slowly but surely, like from what you're saying, a bit at a time. So you have all this stuff in this book. Cheryl-Ann, I want you to tell everybody where they can get a hold of you. If they wanted to coach with you, or if they wanted you to come out and speak to their organization, or to get a hold of this hot number as soon as it gets released, where can they get a hold of you?
So I have a website, CherylAnnLovie.com. Very simple. There's no hyphen between my name, although my name is hyphenated, but it's just CherylAnnLovie.com. My company is called It's My Turn. My book is called It's Your Turn. On the website, there's a work with me page, and you can review all of my podcasts, or sorry, this is my first podcast. You can review all of my keynotes. You can review my YouTube channel, everything from my website. So and you can see where to pre-order my book. You just have to enter your email, and we'll let you know when it's all available. It will be available on Amazon. And the launch is happening in January. The release of the book will be probably first couple of weeks into February. And I'm really, really super excited about it. And I'm so happy for your support too, Roxanne. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for sharing all this amazing wisdom. So I think, for anyone out there, life it's full, and it can be beautiful, but it also has its challenges, but we all will have pain, but we don't need to suffer. And I think Cheryl-Ann's story is such an amazing example of this success, but there was pain, but she didn't live in the suffering once she got the messages. She didn't make it about, I'm a victim, but now that I have this information, what do I do with it? So if you're in that space, just recognize that anybody out there that you see, that you perceive as being successful, they've all been through things. You may not know their story, but when you read a book like Cheryl-Ann's, you'll see the journey, and you can learn the same wisdoms from getting a hold of her book. So again, for anybody that wants to learn about authentic leadership, either at home or at work, all you got to do is, just go to chatwithroxanne.com, and you'll book a discovery call with me. Again, Cheryl-Ann, thanks so much for your time. And for everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannederhage.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.